Are you the one who is coming? Or are we to wait on another? John wonders. Are you the one we have been expecting? Or is there yet something better out there? Last week we heard John the Baptist strident preaching about one who was coming with great power and might. He promised that this one would set things right. He'd consume all those standing in the way of God's kingdom coming into being with fiery vengeance. And yet, sometime later, it almost seems as if John is having a crisis of faith. Perhaps John expected that the world would have been changed dramatically with the coming of this anointed one. So sitting there in the jail cell with lots of time on his hands, it is perhaps a bit understandable that John might just be just a little bit impatient. As he's waiting, as he's wondering, are you the real deal, Jesus? When asked, Jesus simply replied, "Tell John what you hear and what you see." Now, it's doubtful that John would have been ignorant about the work that Jesus was doing. In fact, it said John had heard reports about Jesus. He had probably heard that there were blind who were able to see, that there were those who were once lame, now able to walk, that lepers who were once cut off from society are now restored and made whole. And it's no doubt that John would have recognized in Jesus' response that Jesus was making reference to the prophet Isaiah's words that we heard read earlier. But I have to wonder, as we head into Christmas, if we might have times when Jesus just doesn't seem to be the Messiah that we'd like him to be. I wonder if we might find ourselves just a little bit disappointed in Jesus. Perhaps that's why it's harder and harder to keep Jesus the reason for the season, and why Santa Claus is winning the popularity contest these days. Christmas time can be a real stressor. Physicians and psychologists and even pastors are aware that sadness can be really acute during this time of year. There are some who try to fake it by denying the darkness that lurks just behind the plastered-on smiles. They surround themselves with Christmas music. They bump it up as loud as they can. They light more candles. They brighten the doorways with blinking lights. They add more and more presents under the tree, trying to bolster their sagging joy. But you know, sometimes all it takes is just one little thing. A loss. A falling out with a friend. The loss of a job. Death of a loved one. The failing of one's health. That seems to be all it takes to push us over the edge and make our illusion of happiness vanish and leave us feeling isolated, alone, and perhaps as doubtful and disappointed as John in that dark, dank cell. I wonder how John took Jesus' answer. I wonder if he felt reassured that everything was going to be all right. What John was mostly looking for, what we're perhaps mostly looking for, is a strong and powerful Messiah one who can come in and take control. We want one who can fix the things that we can't fix ourselves. But what John got, and what we get instead, is one who comes in humility, who seems entirely too preoccupied with the lame and the deaf and the poor and the ill, at least for our taste. In fact, it is perhaps the very reason why Jesus isn't that powerful. Because he seems to be overly concerned about those who have no way of making a difference in the world. You know, if he would just cozy up to the rich and powerful, perhaps Jesus could make a bigger impact. At least his ratings and popularity might go up because, you know, he could do all kinds of commercials and everything else. Why, I wonder, does Jesus send word back to John reminding him what he's been up to? How is that good news for John? How's that supposed to help him while he's in prison? And how is that supposed to resonate as good news to us today? Well, Jesus came not for the strong and mighty, but for the weak and the vulnerable. He comes not in predictable power, but in the promise of the unexpected possibilities. You see, for God, even a tender crocus can bloom in the hottest desert. God can make a way when there doesn't seem to be a way. So the good news for John is that perhaps as he finds himself pacing back and forth in that jail cell, he might just realize that he has a need. He might just realize that in the end he is in complete solidarity with all those who Jesus cares the most about. Those who were once cut off, those who were once without hope, those who were without a champion. And so here is where not taking an offense at Jesus can become good news for you and for me. For you see, to the degree to which we claim to have made it on our own, to the degree that we think we have it all together, well, that's the degree to which we might take offense at Jesus. But for those of us who recognize our need, who recognize that we do depend upon God, we can recognize that the one who came to be born in a stable, the one who came as a child to unwed parents, the one who found his crib in a manger, that's to the degree to which we'll discover that Jesus is the one who is truly for us, the one who truly cares for us. So, sisters and brothers, let us rejoice. For when we see the hungry being fed, when we see the handicapped being made strong, when we see the unclean and those who were once cut off or disenfranchised being brought in, when we see prisoners set free, when we see the lowly being used to do amazing things, that's when we know that the Holy One is drawing near. Amen.